Welcome to the Devin Nunes podcast, breaking through the political noise, separating fact from fiction. From the San Joaquin Valley, the breadbasket of the solar system. Here is your host, Devin Nunes.
Welcome back to the Devin Nunes podcast. It is my honor and privilege to have on Byron York from the Washington Examiner, also a Fox News contributor. And he has a great new book that I'm going to hold up. I actually have two copies because I think Byron sent me one and I bought one. Byron, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this week. It's unusual because I think normally you can only do Fox News and only do the Washington Examiner. So thank you for gracing us with your presence on the Devin Nunes podcast. We've had a lot of the few investigative journalists like yourself that actually have tried to get to the bottom of the Russia hoax, impeachment hoax, et cetera, and nobody was on this more than you. So Byron, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. I do feel like I should be asking you questions, but if we want to do it the other way around, that's perfectly all right.
Well, that is the good thing about my podcast is that, I built this because I want to be able to get people like yourself on where I then get to put you on the spot and ask you very tough questions so that you know what it's like to be me.
Well, maybe you can have your friends from CNN and other places on.
I know you think they would come on. You think all the mainstream media guys would come on my podcast?
Heck yes, of course.
Well, hey, Byron, congratulations. And I will tell you, obsession, of course, I've lived through this, and people are obsessed with Trump, so much so that they actually have not only, you wonder if they're sometimes poisoning their own minds, and at the same time poisoning other people's minds across America. I always wonder and ask myself, do they actually know what the hell they're doing, what they're talking about? And so I thought you're exactly right. I think obsession is the right title because there are people in the swamp that are absolutely obsessed with the President of the United States.
That's the only thing that really describes it. If you want to sort of look at how the book got started, go back to December 2019, which amazingly enough is not even a year ago. And you know all of this. House Democrats are rushing to impeach President Trump by Christmas. And a reporter asks Nancy Pelosi, says, what's the hurry here? What's the rush here? And she said, there's no rush. This has been going on for 2.5 years since Mueller. And, I don't think any Democrats really noticed that, but a lot of Republicans really took note when she said that. They said, wow, she has finally admitted it. This impeachment is not about Ukraine. It's not about a phone call. It is a continuation of the long effort to remove President Trump from office. So I wanted to view it all in one book, to start with the origins of the Mueller investigation. And I really start with President Trump's relationship with James Comey. I don't go all the way back to dossier stuff in 2015 and 16, but I start with Comey because that leads to Mueller. And then we go all the way through the impeachment acquittal. So it's really quite a journey.
Well, it's too bad you mentioned that. So I just got the book yesterday. So I was paging through, and I actually caught that. That's on page 280, that quote by Nancy Pelosi. And I was going to save that to ask you that for the Friday show. But since you brought it up, I had forgot about that quote. I had forgot. That's such a. How did you dig that up? Where was that at? I mean, I don't know why we're not using that quote more. Because it states the obvious of what we knew the whole time, that they were always about impeachment.
Talk to your staff. I don't know. I took note of it at the time. And if you look, I liked it so much I mentioned it twice. It's also in the preface to the book. And Chris Stewart, who is the Republican congressman from Utah, who's a member of the House Intelligence Committee, your committee.
Yeah. And I should say an accomplished writer himself, a best-selling author.
He wrote a diary. He kept a diary of the impeachment time. And I had to do a lot of convincing, but he sent it to me and allowed me to use parts of it. This was just of the actual politics and what was going on. It wasn't his home life and baseball games or anything like that. It was just that, and it certainly had nothing classified in it. But it was his reaction to what was going on each day. And he reacted to that. That night, he said, finally, she has said it. And I talked to Doug Collins, who was the ranking member at the time on Judiciary. And he said, it just confirmed everything we thought, that this all began with Tears in Brooklyn. And Tears in Brooklyn was Doug Collins' way of referring to that very sad election night at Hillary Clinton's election headquarters, and Democrats' inability to accept the fact that Donald Trump had been elected president.
So what I want to do is maybe walk through, I actually was on your podcast, you may remember, a couple of years ago, and I remember as I was preparing for that podcast, I can't remember the exact time frame, but you interviewed John Dowd.
Yeah.
And John Dowd did something that I think is quite unusual, because essentially he quit the Trump team because he did not want the president to sit down with Mueller.
Yeah.
I first learned about that from your podcast. When you interviewed John Dowd. It's very interesting. Since then, I've had some conversations with him. It's an interesting look into Mueller, because as we figured and as we knew in the House Republican side, we knew that from day one, when as I've said, Mueller walks in the door and says, "Where are the Russians?" And they had to say, "Bob, there are no Russians. This is all. We don't have anything with Russia. There's no Five Eyes intelligence. There's no actual intelligence. There's no finished intelligence products. There's really only the dossier that had already been totally debunked." And at that point, I always think back, that was when Mueller was appointed, there was actually kind of a strange sigh of relief on our side, because we said, gosh, finally, they're gonna realize here that the real culprits in this are Christopher Steele. We didn't know who his sources are at the time, but whoever hell his sources are were likely either fake Russians. This was fake information of some kind, but likely this could be a Russian op, and it wasn't Trump that was trying to, help, get information from Russians. It was actually the Clinton campaign, because clearly that dossier. Now we don't know that at the time, but we think we're kind of relieved. Mueller walks in the door. He clearly Dowd kind of acts like Mueller does seem to have his wits about him at that time, because clearly a year later he doesn't.
Right.
But talk to us, Byron. Give us some kind of retrospect, looking into Dowd's frame of mind there, and why he decides to quit the Trump team.
Here's what happened. Dowd is part of the original legal team hired after the Mueller appointment, because the president was shocked by the appointment of Mueller. Rod Rosenstein had really kind of sandbagged him with it. He was shocked, but of course, once it happens, he's got to deal with it. So he hires a legal team. And what happens is they come up with a strategy of what you might call radical cooperation. Because the president, once this investigation is a reality, the president wants it over really fast. So he authorized Dowd to go to Mueller and say basically this: I, President Trump, I want this investigation over yesterday, fast as possible. Now you, Special Counsel Mueller, you're going to want to see hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. You're going to want to interview everybody in the White House. Now, a lot of that would be covered by executive privilege, and I could oppose this, and we could fight it out in court, and it would take forever. But here's my deal. Here's my proposal to offer to you. We'll give you everything. We'll give you all the papers. We'll let you talk to everybody. You want to talk to the White House counsel? Sure, we'll let you do it. But in return, we want you to promise to get this investigation over quickly. And Mueller famously said, or is famous now, he said, "I don't let any grass grow under me." And they took that to mean he would get things done quickly. And he and Dowd shook hands on this deal. This is June 2017. They shake hands. It was never written down. It was never signed. It was a handshake deal. All right. So at that point, Mueller immediately begins looking for collusion, because that's his main assignment. And that's what the country has been going nuts about for 6 months. So he starts looking for collusion in all the normal places you would expect, around George Papadopoulos, around Carter Page. Trump Tower meeting, that wacky episode at the Republican convention. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
There was a news column that said Trump had gutted the platform to make Putin happy. So Trump's lawyers can see what's going on. They can see who Mueller is interviewing. They can talk to him afterwards. What did he ask you? And they can see that Mueller is coming up with a dry hole on collusion. So by the fall of 2017, when Mueller has been in office just a few months, they can see that.
Right. But Byron, I just want to back up just to back to the beginning. Mueller walks in the door. I mean, you mentioned Papadopoulos and Page and all these guys. The FBI already had overwhelming evidence that those guys didn't have. They had nothing. And by then they had all their communications, all their emails, everything. They had interviewed him, they had spied on him. Now we know, because of the work that we did, we even know they had this whole Cambridge club set up where they were, getting money over to Cambridge and setting up this deal that, where they were secretly going and interviewing Page and Papadopoulos. I mean, so what is Dowd and some of these characters on the Trump team? I mean, by the fall, they know damn well this whole thing is a hoax.
And this is what they do. They begin to, first of all, as I say in the book, Trump wants his lawyers to remind Mueller regularly, like at least once a week, that the investigation is hampering his ability to govern. It's making his relations with foreign leaders more difficult. He hears that foreign leaders are asking, well, is President Trump going to stay president? What's going to happen here? So Trump is constantly telling Mueller or Mueller's assistants, look, this is a real problem. They have a meeting at the 21st of December in 2017, and it's a big deal. And basically, the Trump team says, look, we've kept our end of the bargain. We've given you everything. You have not found collusion. You have not established that it ever existed, much less anybody who might have been involved in it. It's time to wrap it up. And at that point, the Mueller people said, we're not going to do it. As a matter of fact, we're looking at obstruction of justice, and we need to talk to the president. Now, this does not go over well with Dowd or anybody else. And what happens is they start arguing. And a few months later, in March of 2018, they have another meeting. And again, the Trump team says, look, you don't have anything. It's time to wrap it up. And they say, we want to talk to the president. And then Mueller says, maybe I'll just subpoena the president. And there's this scene where Dowd just slams his hand on the table. And he says, you want to do that? Go ahead. You're going to have a war and you're going to lose. I mean, it's like a TV show. And they're yelling at each other. And actually, what happened after that meeting, Dowd left and Rudy Giuliani came. But the next year of the investigation was one long, stupid fight over whether the president would testify. And it just went on and on and on.
Yeah, that's amazing, Byron. You did great investigative work on this. You really got into had access that a lot of us didn't have into the team. And Dowd, I think, to his credit, did the country a great service, because ensuring that Trump didn't testify to these guys that were clearly on a witch hunt. We now can say that definitively. It was an absolute witch hunt. Before we go, this episode, you did the investigative reporting about what happened at the Republican National Convention, and you kind of mentioned it once, but a lot of people's lives were destroyed by this, and you brought this up, so it made me think, and I think it'd be great to just close with this week. Mueller destroyed a lot of lives. Fusion, GPS, Clinton campaign destroyed a lot of lives, but probably none, not a sadder case, and there's a lot of equally sad cases. But then what happened to the folks that just wanted to be involved at the RNC? And you did some great work on that with, I think he goes by JD, right?
JD Gordon.
JD Gordon and Sam Clovis, a longtime Republican activist. These poor guys got absolutely destroyed. You did that breakthrough work because, if you ask people out there, oh yeah, the RNC platform was changed, and in fact, the opposite was true. I think it'd be good for you just to walk people through what happened to J.D. Gordon.
Yeah, I'll say what happened. J.D. Gordon was the person on the scene from the Trump campaign, working with the delegates and on the platform committee during the convention. And the story that it all came out from a story by Josh Rogan in the Washington Post, who said that the Trump campaign had, quote, gutted the Republican platform on the issue of Ukraine. And the thing is that the Trump campaign had allegedly removed a section calling for lethal aid to Ukraine from the platform in order to please Vladimir Putin. And so I thought, well, okay, if they removed it, there must be some original draft of the platform that I can find, and then I can see what exactly they took out. How did they gut this? So I did a bit of reporting, and I found the people who were on the platform committee and the people who had written the original platform, and I got the original platform draft. And it was actually pretty tough on Ukraine. It called for continuing sanctions. It called for more democracy there, and it was kind of standard language on Ukraine. Yeah. And it didn't say anything about lethal aid. It wasn't in there. So what actually occurred was a single delegate, a woman from Texas named Diana Denman, who had actually gone to observe elections in Ukraine.
I forgot about this, Byron. They brought that poor lady to testify before us too. I totally forgot about that. And she was in her 70s or early 80s, right?
And she offered an amendment, and the amendment would impose tougher sanctions, including military aid to Ukraine and including lethal aid. So basically what happened was, so it wasn't in the original thing, and this is one person's amendment. And so they go through it, and they leave most of her amendment in, which calls for much tougher policy toward Ukraine than any Republican platform had called for, and certainly any Democratic platform had called for. They took out the lethal aid part, and called for appropriate military aid. So it's calling for actual military aid to Ukraine. So the fact was, you start with the draft. The Republican platform on Ukraine was strengthened as a result of this process, and it was strengthened with the approval of the Trump campaign. And yet this became, for a while, Exhibit A for collusion. And in fact, Mueller did investigate this right off the bat. One of the first interviews he did was with the woman who drafted the original platform for the RNC. And these people have to get lawyers. It costs them a lot of money. And J.D. Gordon had to testify not only to Mueller, he had to testify to your committee, he had to testify to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and this is costing him tens of thousands of dollars that he does not have. Diana Denman had to testify as well. So this was a wild goose chase that did cost a lot of people a lot of time and reputation.
Well, you did damn good work on that, Byron. I mean, that's what real investigative journalism is all about. And J.D. Gordon, should be said, this is somebody who was a 20-year retired military. Sam Clovis, who was also wrapped up in this, longtime Republican activist from Iowa. He got run out of Washington, D.C. because of this total scam. And then, of course, the poor lady in Texas. These were all people that just want to be part of the RNC, want to go to the convention, want to take place in the process. And as you know, that these platforms, and you alluded to it, Byron, these platforms are what party people want. It's not what the elected officials want. And the irony in all of this is that the Trump administration has done more, but against Ukraine and Russia than Obama. But what was not talked about, why did no one investigate Obama or Clinton? Did they have ties to Russians? Because this was real policy. We Republicans had given them money to use against Russia, including the defense bill, had authorized the use of military aid, including lethal weapons, to give to Ukraine. It wasn't Trump. that didn't do it. It was Obama who didn't do it. So, I mean, just incredible that Mueller would spend 1 second on that when it was, if anything, as you said, it was strengthened. And by the way, it would have been consistent with what Obama had been doing for 8 years.
Yeah, it was not only strengthened, but Trump then, as president, later went on to authorize the sale of these Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, which everybody, remember during the whole impeachment, you had several witnesses from the State Department, and you or other Republicans asked, by the way, did the president's policy, was it stronger toward Ukraine than Obama's policy? And the answer was always yes. And was the sale of javelins to Ukraine, did that help strengthen Ukraine's ability to stand up to Russia? And the answer was yes. So, I mean, that's the way it turned out. But back to Mueller, he started out by investigating this thing right off the bat.
Which was an entire hoax and a lie. And none of those people have ever been apologized to by the fake news media or Mueller, and they're out tens of thousands of dollars. Brian, you did a hell of a job on this, but that's a great segue. So those of you are going to have to wait to hear about on Friday. We're going to talk to Byron on Friday episode about the witch hunt, about impeachment. Byron was on the ground. I remember Byron even came to my office a couple times during impeachment. So you can follow Byron. He's now at Parler, at Byron York, and also Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor. This is Devin Nunes. We'll catch you Friday.
Thanks for listening to the Devin Nunes Podcast. We invite you to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And remember, you can download this podcast on iTunes or at devinnunes.com.
Storm clouds been gathering so long, I don't know.
The darkness around us leaves no easy road.
We started wondering if every road dead ends our dreams. Wind whips the dust up and rain's pouring down.
Good people struggling in every hometown.
We've started wondering if we even matter at all. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. Now it's not our first trial by fire like this.
It's nothing hard working family can't fix.
We've got the power to save it all here in our hands. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. As we, the people, free and strong, fight through the dark night toward the dawn. Freedom marches on. Now the hard road is waiting, but we're not afraid.
That's why they call her the home of the brave.
With a prayer and a purpose, we're already half the way there. We'll take that hard road to happier days, 'cause we kept our American faith. Ooh, we kept our American. We kept our American. Ooh, we kept our American. We kept our American faith. Freedom marches on.
Paid for by Devin Nunes Campaign Committee.